The mountains keep secrets better than most people keep promises. This is the story of a valley that buried its truth beneath winter snow, a woman who disappeared from her own kitchen table, and a marriage that crumbled under the weight of lies told in daylight. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and the time, because it's always powerful to see how far these stories travel. Tuesday morning, March 15th, 2022. The last patches of snow were melting in the foothills of Cedar Ridge, Colorado. Martinez drove the winding mountain road from her small apartment in town to the sprawling ranch house she had once called home, just like she did every Tuesday morning to help her sister Alina with the horses. But this Tuesday would shatter everything she thought she knew about family. This Tuesday would expose secrets that had been festering for months like infection. Beneath healthy skin, Sarah pulled her pickup truck into the circular driveway and immediately sensed something was wrong. The air felt different. Elena's silver Toyota Highlander sat in its usual spot next to the barn, covered with a thin layer of morning frost. Her husband Marcus's black Ford F-250 was parked by the equipment shed, its diesel engine still ticking as it cooled. Both vehicles were there, but Alina was nowhere to be found. Sarah called out for her sister as she walked toward the house, her voice echoing off the mountains that surrounded the property. No answer came back, just the sound of wind through the pine trees and the distant lowing of cattle in the upper pastures. She tried the front door, first locked. This was unusual because Alina always left it unlocked during the day, trusting in the isolation of their mountain location and the protection of their 3 German shepherds, who were mysteriously absent from their usual posts around the property. Sarah walked around to the kitchen entrance they always used, the door that opened directly into Elena's domain, the heart of their family gatherings. This door was also locked, and when Sarah cupped her hands against the window to peer inside, what she saw made her stomach drop. Elena's coffee mug was still on the counter, half full and stone cold. Her sister never left coffee unfinished, never. Next to the mug were Elena's reading glasses, the ones she needed to see, the small print on medication labels and business documents. Alina was practically blind without those glasses and would never have gone anywhere without them. But it was the kitchen table that truly alarmed Sarah. Elena's laptop was open, still displaying her email inbox, and scattered around it were financial documents and bank statements. As if she had been interrupted in the middle of reviewing something important, Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed Elena's number with trembling fingers. The call went straight to voicemail, Elena's cheerful voice promising to call back as soon as possible. Sarah tried again, then a third time. Each attempt ended the same way. This wasn't like Alina at all. Alina Castellanos was the kind of woman who would text you if she was running 5 minutes late to anything. She was organized. They had been meeting every week for 3 years, ever since. Sarah had moved back to Cedar Ridge after her messy divorce from a man who had tried to control every aspect of her life. Alina lived for these mornings together, grooming the horses, planning trail rides, catching up on family gossip over coffee that was always too strong and pastries that were always too sweet. Alina would share her dreams of expanding the horse boarding business, of maybe offering riding lessons to children from the city, of building the kind of operation that would be her legacy. Sarah would listen and offer advice, grateful for these moments of sisterly connection that had become the anchor of her week. The panic that had been building in Sarah's chest since she arrived now threatened to overwhelm her. She walked around the house, checking every window, looking for any sign of movement inside. The living room looked normal, with Elena's favorite blanket folded neatly on the couch and her latest romance novel bookmarked on the coffee table. The master bedroom appeared undisturbed, the bed made with military precision, as Elena always left it. But in Elena's home office, Sarah noticed something that made her blood turn to ice. Elena's purse was still sitting on the desk chair, its contents spilled as if someone had been searching through it hastily. Elena's wallet was there, along with her credit cards and driver's license. Her car keys were in the purse too, which explained why her Toyota hadn't moved from its spot in the driveway. But Elena's insulin kit was missing from its usual place in the front compartment of the purse. Elena was a type 1 diabetic who required daily insulin injections to survive. She carried her medical supplies with her everywhere, a habit drilled into her by doctors who had warned that missing even a few doses could be knife-threatening. Sarah drove the quarter-mile down the dirt road to her brother-in-law's auto repair shop, a converted barn where Marcus worked on the heavy machinery that kept the ranch running. The familiar smell of motor oil and welding sparks filled the air as she approached. She found Marcus underneath a massive John Deere tractor, his legs sticking out from beneath the engine compartment. Country music playing from a radio that looked like it had survived several decades of abuse. "Marcus," she called out, her voice tight with worry. "Where's Elena? I can't find her anywhere. And she was supposed to meet me an hour ago." Marcus slid out from under the tractor slowly, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He wiped his hands on a greasy rag, taking his time before looking up at Sarah. When he did meet her eyes, his expression was one she couldn't quite read. There was something blank about it, almost bored, as if Sarah had asked him about the weather rather than his missing wife. "What do you mean you can't find her?" he asked, his voice flat and emotionless. "She was in the house when I left this morning, making coffee like always." "Well, she's not there now," Sarah said, her frustration building with each passing second. "Her car is there, but both doors are locked. She's not answering her phone." "When exactly did you last see her?" Marcus shrugged, turning back to his work as if the conversation wasn't worth his full attention. "Around 6 this morning, maybe 6:15. She was puttering around in the kitchen. I told her I'd be working on this tractor most of the day, that I'd probably skip lunch." He paused, not looking at Sarah. "You know how she is. She probably went for a walk or decided to visit someone in town. She'd turn up eventually, but Sarah knew her sister better than anyone on earth. Better, perhaps, than Marcus did, despite their 8 years of marriage. Elena didn't take walks alone, especially not in the early morning when the mountain wildlife was most active. She was terrified of the black bears that sometimes wandered down from the higher elevations, bears that had been spotted near the ranch just last week. Elena wouldn't leave the house without telling Marcus exactly where she was going and when she expected to return. And she definitely wouldn't go anywhere without her phone, which had become practically surgically attached to her hand in recent years. Sarah spent the rest of the morning driving every road and trail in a 10-mile radius of the ranch. She checked the small grocery store in town, where Elena sometimes picked up supplies for unexpected guests. She stopped at the feed store, where Elena bought hay and grain for the boarded horses. She drove by the coffee shop that Elena had discovered in the neighboring town. The one that served the expensive lattes Elena had developed a weakness for, despite Marcus's complaints about wasting money on overpriced coffee. No one had seen Elena, the grocery store clerk, who knew Elena by name and always asked about the horses, said she hadn't been in for over a week. The feed store owner, an elderly man named Pete, who had known Elena since she was a teenager, looked genuinely concerned when Sarah explained the situation. Alina had an account at the feed store and usually placed her weekly order every Monday morning like clockwork. This week, no order had come in. By early afternoon, Sarah knew she had to call the police. Every instinct in her body was screaming that something terrible had happened to her sister. Alina would never voluntarily miss their Tuesday morning routine. Never lock the house during the day, never ignore phone calls from family. Something was desperately wrong, and with each passing hour, Sarah's fear was growing into something closer to certainty. Deputy Thomas Chen from the Mesa County Sheriff's Office arrived at the Castellanos Ranch just as the sun was beginning to set behind the mountain peaks, painting the snow-capped summits in shades of orange and pink that would have taken Elena's breath away. Chen was a 10-year veteran of the sheriff's office, a methodical man who had handled dozens of missing person cases in the rural county where people sometimes disappeared into the wilderness and were never found. He found Marcus in the same place. Sarah had left him hours earlier, still working on the tractor, still listening to the same country music station. When Chen explained why he was there, Marcus barely looked up from his work. His reaction so muted that the deputy immediately took note of it in his report. "She's probably just blowing off steam somewhere," Marcus told the deputy, his tone suggesting mild annoyance rather than concern. "Alina gets moody sometimes, especially when she's stressed about the business. She come back when she's ready to talk." Deputy Chen found this response deeply troubling. In his decade of experience with missing person cases, he had seen every kind of reaction from worried family members: panic, tears, anger, desperation. Hopeful of these were normal. But Marcus's apparent indifference was not normal at all. In Chun's experience, spouses were usually frantic when their partners disappeared, calling every hour for updates, organizing search parties, posting on social media. Marcus seemed almost bored by the whole situation. "When did you last see your wife, Mr. Castellanos?" Chen asked, taking out his notebook and preparing to document every detail of Marcus's account. "This morning, around 6. Marcus replied, repeating the same story he had told Sarah earlier. "She was making coffee in the kitchen, probably planning her day. I came out here to work on this tractor because it's been giving me trouble for weeks. That's the last time I saw her." Chen walked Marcus through the rest of the morning in methodical detail. What was Alina wearing when he last saw her? Her usual ranch clothes, jeans, boots, a flannel shirt, and a fleece vest. What was her mood? Normal, maybe a little tired because she'd been up late working on business accounts. Had Alina seemed upset about anything? Not particularly, though she'd been stressed lately about some problems with employees at the horseboarding business. Had they argued recently? Marcus paused at this question, just long enough for Chen to notice. "Just the usual disagreements married couples have," Marcus said. "Nothing serious." "Did Alina have any history of leaving without warning?" "No," Marcus admitted. "Alina had never disappeared before, but she could be unpredictable when she was angry or overwhelmed." "She's got a temper," Marcus told the deputy, his voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "When she gets mad, she can say some pretty harsh things. Maybe she just needed to get away for a while, to cool off and think things through." But when Chen interviewed Sarah later that evening at her small apartment in town, she painted a very different picture of her sister. Alina was responsible, caring, and deeply committed to her family and her business. She had 12 horses boarded at the ranch, animals that depended on her for daily care, fresh water, and feeding schedules that Alina maintained with the precision of a Swiss watch. She would never abandon them, not even for a day, because she knew that horses could colic or injure themselves without warning, "Something's happened to her," Sarah told the deputy, tears streaming down her face as she sat at her kitchen table, Elena's favorite coffee mug clenched in her hands. Elena would never just leave. Never. Someone needs to find her before it's too late. Chen asked Sarah about Elena's marriage to Marcus, and the picture that emerged was complicated and troubling. Elena and Marcus Castellanos had been married for 8 years, but those who knew them best said it wasn't a marriage built on love or even deep compatibility. Elena had married Marcus after a difficult and expensive divorce from her first husband, a controlling man who had tried to dictate every aspect of her life, from her clothing choices to her friendships. After that traumatic experience, Elena had been drawn to Marcus's stability and his practical skills rather than passion or romance. Marcus owned 50 acres of prime ranch land in Cedar Ridge, inherited from his grandfather, and he had the mechanical expertise to maintain the barns and fencing that Elena's horse boarding business required. It was a partnership based on mutual need rather than mutual affection, and over the years, the cracks in that foundation had become increasingly difficult to ignore. Elena was outgoing and social, always organizing trail rides for the horse owners, hosting barbecues that brought together riders from across the county, planning camping trips and horse shows that built community among the people who shared her passion for horses. Elena thrived on these interactions, finding energy and joy in bringing people together around the animals she loved. Marcus, by contrast, was solitary and serious, more comfortable with machines than people. He rarely participated in Elena's social events, preferring to stay in his workshop or disappear into the mountains on solo hunting trips that could last for days. When he did interact with Elena's friends and customers, he was often critical or dismissive, making comments about city people who didn't understand ranch life, or women who treated horses like pets rather than livestock. Those closest to Elena said she had been increasingly unhappy for months. She had confided in Sarah that she felt trapped in the marriage, that Marcus had become controlling and critical of everything she did. He questioned her spending on the business, monitored her phone calls with customers, and made snide comments about her appearance in front of their friends, particularly when Elena had gained weight after a knee injury limited her riding. The horse boarding business was Elena's pride and joy, the realization of a dream she had harbored since childhood. She had started with just 3 horses and had built it into a thriving operation that generated substantial income and provided a valuable service to horse owners throughout the region. Elena took pride in the quality of care she provided, the attention to detail that kept her horses healthy and happy, the personal relationships she built with the owners who trusted her with their beloved animals. But the business was also a source of constant tension between Elena and Marcus. Elena wanted to expand, to build additional stalls and attract more clients, to offer riding lessons and maybe even host small horse shows. She had a vision of turning their property into a premier equestrian facility that would serve the growing population of horse enthusiasts in Colorado. Marcus resisted every suggestion for expansion, claiming they couldn't afford the improvements and that Elena was being unrealistic about the potential for growth. He complained that the boarding business brought too many strangers onto their property, that Elena spent too much money on feed and veterinary care, that she was too emotionally attached to animals that were just business assets. Yet somehow, Marcus always had money for new hunting equipment, for modifications to his trucks, for expensive tools that he claimed were necessary for ranch maintenance, but that Elena suspected were simply toys for his personal use. The contradiction was one of many that had begun to erode Elena's trust in her husband's financial judgment and his commitment to their shared future. What Elena didn't know, what Marcus had been hiding from her for over a year, was that their financial situation was far more precarious than she realized. The ranch was heavily mortgaged, and Marcus had been taking additional loans against the property to cover debts that Elena knew nothing about. Marcus had developed a serious gambling problem, losing thousands of dollars in weekly poker games in Denver, chasing losses with increasingly desperate bets that only made the situation worse. Elena's successful boarding business was actually the only thing keeping them solvent, but Marcus resented her success and the independence it gave her. In his mind, Elena was getting above herself, forgetting that she was living on his family's land and depending on his mechanical skills to maintain the facilities that made her business possible. The fact that her income was actually subsidizing his gambling losses was a reality he refused to acknowledge even to himself. The day before Elena disappeared, she had made a discovery that changed everything between them. While looking for insurance papers in Marcus's desk, she had found bank statements that revealed the true state of their finances. The ranch she thought they owned free and clear was actually in danger of foreclosure. The business account she had been using to expand the boarding operation was nearly empty, drained by mysterious transfers that Marcus had never discussed with her. Elena had confronted Marcus that Monday evening, demanding an explanation for the missing money and the hidden debts. According to what Elena later told Sarah during a late-night phone call, the confrontation had been explosive. Marcus had accused Elena of being ungrateful, of not appreciating everything he had done to support her business dreams, of acting like she was better than him just because she made friends easily with the horse owners. Elena had accused Marcus of betrayal, of gambling away their future, of lying to her about their financial situation while she worked 7 days a week to build something lasting and meaningful. She had demanded to see all of their financial records, threatened to contact a lawyer, talked about separating their business assets and personal property. "I'm done," Elena had told her sister during that late-night phone call, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "I can't do this anymore. I can't live with someone I can't trust, someone who lies to me every single day. I'm going to file for divorce and sell the business. I'll find somewhere else to board the horses, somewhere I don't have to worry about whether the mortgage is getting paid." Those would be the last words Sarah would ever hear from her sister, spoken in anger and pain, but also with a determination that gave Sarah hope. Elena was finally ready to take control of her life, to leave a marriage that had become toxic and build something better for herself. She deserved that chance, deserved the happiness that had eluded her for so many years. The search for Elena Castellanos began in earnest the day after she was reported missing. Deputy Chen organized a team of volunteers from the local search and rescue organization, experienced hikers and horsemen who knew the mountainous terrain around the ranch better than anyone. They combed hiking trails that Elena sometimes rode, creek beds where she might have gone to water the horses, remote clearings where she could have been thrown from a horse or injured in a fall. The search was hampered by the terrain itself. The ranch sat in a valley surrounded by steep mountains, with countless gullies, caves, and hidden spaces where someone could be injured and unable to signal for help. There were old mining claims scattered throughout the area, abandoned shafts and tunnels that could be dangerous even for experienced hikers. The search teams worked methodically, but they found no trace of Elanino clothing, no personal items, no signs that she had been in any of the areas they covered. The the sheriff's office brought in canine units specifically trained to track human scent. The dogs picked up Elena's scent near the house and followed it for about 50 yards before losing the trail near a dirt road that led to the upper pastures. This suggested that Elena might have gotten into a vehicle at that spot, but there was no way to know if she had done so willingly or if she had been forced. Marcus participated in the searches, but his behavior struck many volunteers as odd and inappropriate, while other searchers spent long days hiking through difficult terrain, calling Elena's name and carefully examining every potential clue. Marcus would show up for an hour or two. He claimed he needed to take care of the horses and maintain the ranch equipment, but Sarah noticed that he wasn't actually doing either of those things properly. The horses, which Elena had cared for with meticulous attention to their individual needs and schedules, were being fed irregularly. Their stalls weren't being cleaned daily, as Elena had always done, and their water troughs were sometimes empty for hours at a time. Two of the boarders, frustrated with the declining level of care and worried about their horses' health, removed their animals and took them to facilities elsewhere. Marcus seemed unconcerned about the loss of income, even though Elena had often talked about how important each boarding fee was to their monthly budget. When Sarah confronted Marcus about the deteriorating care of the horses, his response was dismissive and almost hostile. "Elena's not here to micromanage everything," he told her. "The horses are fine. They don't need to be pampered like house pets." But Sarah could see that the horses were not fine. They were losing weight, becoming listless, showing signs of stress and neglect that would have horrified Elena. These were not just business assets to Elena, they were individuals she knew by name and personality, animals she had cared for like family members. The idea that Marcus was allowing them to suffer in her absence was almost as painful as Elena's disappearance itself. A week after Elena's disappearance, Sarah made a discovery that shattered any remaining hope she might have held that her sister had left voluntarily. She had gone to the ranch to check on the horses and found Marcus in the barn, feeding a pile of Elena's personal belongings into a burning barrel that he normally used for ranch trash. Sarah could see Elena's favorite riding boots being consumed by flames, along with some of her clothes, a box of photographs from their childhood, and several items of jewelry that Elena treasured. When Sarah demanded an explanation, running toward the barrel to try to save what she could, Marcus blocked her path and claimed he was cleaning out clutter. "Elena told me to get rid of this stuff months ago," Marcus said, his voice defensive and angry. "She said it was taking up too much space in the closet, that she wanted to simplify her life." But Sarah knew her sister better than that. Elena treasured those photographs. They had looked through them together just a few weeks earlier, laughing about their shared memories growing up in Colorado, the horses they had ridden as children, the dreams they had shared of someday owning their own ranch. Elena would never have asked Marcus to burn them, and even if she had, she would have offered them to Sarah first. Knowing how much those memories meant to both of them, Sarah called Deputy Chen immediately, her hands shaking as she dialed the number. When the deputy arrived at the ranch 20 minutes later, Marcus had already finished burning the items and had scattered the ashes with a rake. Chen took photographs of the burn pile and collected some of the remaining debris, but it was too late to preserve most of the evidence that might have revealed what Elena had been wearing when she disappeared or provided other crucial. "Why did you burn your wife's belongings, Mr. Castellanos?" Chen asked, his tone more formal and suspicious than it had been during their first interview. "She asked me to get rid of them," Marcus replied, sticking to his story despite the obvious problems with it. She said they were taking up too much space in the closet, that she was tired of looking at old stuff that just made her sad. Chen found this explanation highly suspicious. In his experience with missing person cases, family members typically wanted to preserve everything that belonged to the missing person, hoping their loved one would return and wanting to maintain connections to them. The last thing grieving family members usually wanted to do was destroy personal belongings that held sentimental value. 2 weeks after Alina disappeared, the case took another disturbing turn when Sarah received a call from Jessica Mills, the owner of 3 horses that Alina had been boarding. Jessica was a retired teacher who lived in Denver but kept her horses at Elena's facility because she trusted Elena's care and enjoyed the rural setting for weekend rides. Reach Alina for days about moving one of my horses to a different stall, Jessica told Sarah. Her phone keeps going straight to voicemail. So I drove out to the ranch yesterday to talk to her in person. Marcus was there, and he told me something I couldn't believe. Jessica explained that Marcus had told her Alina had left him for another man and wasn't coming back. He claimed that Alina had been having an affair for months and had finally decided to run away with her lover, abandoning her marriage, her business, and everything she had worked for. This was the first time Sarah had heard this story, and it contradicted everything Marcus had told the police and the family about Elena's disappearance. When Sarah confronted her brother-in-law about the inconsistency, Marcus became defensive and angry, his demeanor more hostile than she had ever seen it. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt, Marcus said, his voice tight with what seemed like genuine emotion. But Elena's been seeing someone behind my back. She told me she was leaving me for him, that she never really loved me anyway. That's why she took off without saying goodbye to anyone. Sarah didn't believe him for a second. Alina would never have had an affair, would never have left without saying goodbye to her sister, would never have abandoned the horses she considered family members. The story made no sense given everything Sarah knew about her sister's character and values. Who is this man she supposedly ran off with? Sarah demanded, her voice rising with anger and frustration. Marcus claimed he didn't know the man's name, only that Alina had been sneaking around with him for months, meeting him in town when she claimed to be running errands for the business. But when Deputy Chen investigated this claim, he found no evidence that Alina had been involved with anyone else. Her phone records showed no suspicious calls or text messages. Her email and social media accounts revealed no communications with any men other than Marcus and family members. Her credit card statements showed no unexplained purchases or visits to restaurants or hotels where she must had met someone. The affair story was clearly a fabrication, but it revealed something important about Marcus's state of mind. He was beginning to realize that Elena's disappearance was being taken seriously by law enforcement and the community, that people were asking questions he couldn't answer satisfactorily. The affair story was his attempt to provide a plausible explanation for Elena's absence while portraying himself as the victim of a faithless wife rather than a suspect in her disappearance. 1 month after Elena's disappearance, Sarah made a decision that would ultimately change the trajectory of the case. She hired Rebecca Torres, a former Denver police detective who had left the force to work as a private investigator specializing in missing person cases. Torres had solved several high-profile disappearances in Colorado and had developed a reputation for persistence and thoroughness that attracted clients from across the western states. "The first thing I always tell families," Torres explained to Sarah during their initial meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Denver, "is that we have to consider all possibilities, even ones that are painful to think about. Sometimes people do leave voluntarily, even people we think would never do that. But in your sister's case, everything I'm hearing suggests something else entirely." Torres began her investigation by recreating Elena's final days in exhaustive detail. She interviewed everyone who had any contact with Elena in the weeks leading up to her disappearance: customers at the boarding facility, employees at businesses Elena frequented, neighbors who might have seen her or her vehicles. She examined financial records going back several years, looking for patterns or anomalies that might provide clues about Elena's state of mind or Marcus's potential motives. She also did something the Mesa County Sheriff's Office had not done. Largely due to resource constraints, she conducted a thorough background investigation of Marcus Castellanos, digging into his history, his finances, his relationships, and his behavior patterns. What Torres discovered was deeply troubling and provided crucial context for understanding the dynamics of Elena's marriage. Marcus had been married twice before Elena, and both marriages had ended in acrimonious divorces marked by accusations of emotional abuse and financial manipulation. His first wife, Amy, had filed for divorce after accusing Marcus of systematically undermining her confidence, isolating her from friends and family, and controlling every aspect of their household finances. She had described a pattern of behavior in which Marcus would be charming and supportive in public, but critical and controlling in private. Marcus's second wife, Linda, had left him after discovering that he had been forging her signature on loan documents, using her credit to secure financing for purchases she knew nothing about. Linda had also told friends that she was afraid of Marcus, that he had threatened her when she tried to assert independence or question his decisions. She had moved out of state immediately after their divorce and had maintained no contact with Marcus since. Both women had described Marcus as someone who presented a facade, normalcy to the outside world, while exercising psychological control over his intimate relationships. They said he was skilled at making his partners doubt their own perceptions and judgment, convincing them that their concerns were unreasonable or that they were lucky to have him. Despite their flaws and inadequacies, Torres also discovered that Marcus's gambling problem was far worse than anyone had realized. He owed money to several bookmakers in Denver and had been taking increasingly desperate measures to pay his debts. The ranch was indeed in foreclosure proceedings, something Marcus had been hiding, not just from Elena, but from everyone who knew them. He had been forging Elena's signature on financial documents, using her business accounts to make payments on debts she knew nothing about. But the most shocking discovery came when Torres examined the insurance policies on the ranch property and on Elena herself. Just 3 months before Elena disappeared, Marcus had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on his wife. The policy was worth $500,000, more than enough to pay off the ranch's debts and Marcus's gambling obligations, with money left over for him to start fresh somewhere else. When Torres presented this information to Deputy Chen and the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, the investigation took on new urgency and focus. Elena's disappearance was now being treated as a probable homicide, and Marcus Castellanos was considered the primary suspect. They brought him in for additional questioning, this time treating him as a suspect rather than a grieving husband seeking help to find his missing wife. Under pressure from experienced interrogators, Marcus's story began to change and contradict itself in significant ways. He admitted that he and Elena had argued more frequently in recent months, and that the argument on the night before she disappeared had been particularly heated. But he continued to insist that Elena had left willingly, that she was alive somewhere and simply didn't want to be found. She said she was done with me, done with the ranch, done with everything, Marcus told investigators. She said she was going to start over somewhere else, that she didn't care what happened to the business or the horses. I haven't heard from her since, and I don't expect to. But investigators found several critical problems with Marcus's account. Security cameras at the ranch's main entrance, which Marcus had installed the previous year to monitor who came and went from the property, showed that Elena's car had never left after she returned home the day before she disappeared. Her credit cards and bank accounts had never been accessed after that date. Most tellingly of all, Elena had left behind her insulin and testing supplies. Elena was a type 1 diabetic who required daily insulin injections and regular blood sugar monitoring to survive. She had been managing her condition for over 15 years and had a sophisticated understanding of how crucial her medication was to her health and survival. She carried backup supplies in her car, her purse, and several locations around the house and barn, knowing that missing even a few doses could result in diabetic ketoacidosis, a potentially fatal condition. No diabetic would voluntarily leave their insulin and testing supplies behind. Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, Elena's endocrinologist, told investigators. Elena was extremely responsible about managing her condition. She had backup supplies everywhere because she understood the consequences of not having access to her medication. She would never have gone anywhere, especially not voluntarily, without ensuring she had adequate insulin supplies. Dr. Gonzalez explained that without insulin, Elena would have become seriously ill within 24 to 48 hours and would have died within a week at most. If Elena was still alive somewhere, she would have had to obtain insulin from a medical provider, which would have created a paper trail that investigators could follow. The absence of any such trail strongly suggested that Elena had died shortly after her disappearance. 6 months after Elena's disappearance, the Mesa County Sheriff's Office had gathered enough evidence to obtain a comprehensive search warrant for the entire ranch property. They brought in cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, forensic anthropologists, and a team of specialists experienced in searching for human remains in difficult terrain. The search lasted 5 days and covered every building, every vehicle, and several hundred acres of land around the house and barn. The cadaver dogs showed interest in several areas, including the barn where Marcus had burned Elena's belongings, a spot near the creek that ran through the property, and an area near the equipment shed where Marcus stored his trucks and farming machinery. But despite the extensive search and the use of sophisticated technology, no physical evidence of Elena was found. No body, no clothing, no personal items that might provide clues about what had happened to her. The lack of physical evidence was frustrating for investigators. But it wasn't unusual in cases where suspects had extensive knowledge of the terrain and access to heavy equipment that could be used to dispose of bodies. Marcus had lived on the ranch for most of his adult life and knew every canyon, cave, and remote area within a 50-mile radius. He had access to bulldozers, and other machinery that could dig deep holes or move large amounts of earth. Rebecca Torres, meanwhile, had developed her own theory about what had happened to Alina based on her analysis of the evidence and her experience with similar cases. She believed Marcus had killed his wife during their argument on the night of March 14th, probably in a moment of rage when Alina had threatened to leave him and expose his financial deceptions. She theorized that Marcus had disposed of Elena's body somewhere in the vast wilderness surrounding the ranch, using his extensive knowledge of the area and his hunting experience to choose a location where she would never be found. Marcus has been hunting in these mountains since he was a teenager, what Torres explained to Sarah during one of their regular meetings. He knows places that even experienced search and rescue teams would never think to look. He knows about old mining claims, abandoned cabins, deep caves that have never been mapped. He could have hidden Elena's body in any number of locations where it might never be discovered. Torres organized several volunteer searches of remote areas where she thought Elena's remains might be hidden. She focused on locations Marcus was known to frequent during his hunting trips, particularly areas that would be difficult to access without specialized equipment and knowledge of the terrain. She recruited experienced hikers, hunters, and horsemen who knew the area well and were committed to finding answers for Elena's family. The searches were physically demanding and emotionally draining, covering rugged terrain in all weather conditions. Volunteers hiked through snow-covered mountain passes, rappelled into deep ravines, and explored caves that required technical climbing skills to access. They found old campsites, abandoned mining equipment, and the remains of various animals, but no trace of Alina. The failure to find physical evidence was discouraging, but Torres refused to give up. She knew from experience that cases without bodies could still be successfully prosecuted if the circumstantial evidence was strong enough. She continued to build her case against Marcus, documenting his lies, his financial motives, his suspicious behavior, and his history of troubled relationships with women. In September 2022, 6 months after Elena's disappearance, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone who had been following the case. He sold the ranch to a development company for significantly less than its appraised value and announced that he was leaving Colorado permanently. Marcus claimed he couldn't bear to stay in a place with so many memories, that every corner of the ranch reminded him of Alina and the pain of her leaving. But those closest to the investigation suspected a different motive. By selling the property, Marcus was liquidating one of his last tangible assets, securing cash before law enforcement could tie the ranch to evidence in his wife's disappearance. The sale was rushed, the paperwork handled with unusual urgency, and within 2 weeks, Marcus had packed his belongings and left Cedar Ridge. He told neighbors he was moving to Nevada, though others whispered about Texas or even Mexico. What was certain was that he vanished almost as completely as Alina had. His phone went dead, his social media accounts were deleted, and even his gambling associates in Denver claimed they hadn't heard from him for Sarah. This felt like losing her sister twice, once to the mysterious disappearance that had torn their family apart, and again to the frustrating lack of justice that allowed the man she believed responsible to walk free. She spent nights staring at Elena's photographs, hearing her laughter in memory, replaying the last phone call again and again. "I'm done," But Sarah knew her sister had never been given the chance to truly be done. To move forward on her own terms, Detective Rebecca Torres refused to let the trail go cold. She pushed the Mesa County Sheriff's Office to keep Marcus listed as the prime suspect, even as prosecutors hesitated to file charges without a body. She compiled binders of evidence, financial records showing the life insurance policy, witness statements about Marcus's indifference, photographs of the burn barrel where Elena's belongings had been destroyed in one particularly telling moment. Torres uncovered bank transfers Marcus had made just days before Elena disappeared. Nearly $15,000 had been withdrawn in cash money, investigators believed might have been used to finance his escape plan. The pattern was clear to Torres. Marcus had killed Elena, destroyed evidence, and prepared to vanish once the pressure became unbearable. But in American courts, suspicion wasn't enough. District attorneys weighed the political risk of prosecuting a high-profile case without a body. No body, no crime was a phrase juries still struggled with, despite advances in forensic science. Without a smoking gun, Marcus Castellanos remained a free man, somewhere beyond Colorado's borders. For Sarah, grief turned into a mission. She established the Find Elena Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting families of missing persons in rural communities. Through fundraising events, social media campaigns, and partnerships with search and rescue groups, the foundation provided resources for cases that too often went overlooked once headlines faded. Local news stations began covering Sarah's efforts, showing footage of candlelight vigils in downtown Cedar Ridge, where neighbors and strangers alike gathered to hold signs with Elena's face. Missing, but not forgotten. The story spread statewide, then nationally. True crime podcasts picked it up, debating the circumstantial evidence against Marcus, speculating about hidden motives, dissecting every reported detail of Elena's last hours. The pressure worked. In late 2022, the FBI's Denver field office announced it would review the case, citing potential interstate flight by the primary suspect. This federal angle kept the case alive when it might otherwise have been archived in January 2023. Nearly a year after Elena's disappearance, Torres received an anonymous tip through the Foundation's hotline. The caller claimed to have seen Marcus in Reno, Nevada, frequenting a small casino on the outskirts of town. The description matched his build, and the caller even mentioned a black Ford truck with Colorado plates. Torres passed the information to the FBI, who confirmed that Marcus had indeed opened a P.O. box in Reno under a different name. Though this didn't prove guilt in Elena's disappearance, it established his attempt to evade detection. Prosecutors grew more confident. This was not the behavior of a grieving husband. Around the same time, cadaver dogs brought back to the Cedar Ridge ranch alerted once again, this time near an equipment trench Marcus had filled with gravel shortly before selling the property. Forensic teams sifted through the area, uncovering fragments of burned cloth, a single earring Sarah identified as Elena's, and microscopic traces of human blood. DNA testing was slow, but weeks later, results confirmed the blood belonged to Elena Castellanos. Though still not a body, it was the break investigators needed. The circumstantial case was now anchored by forensic evidence. On April 3, 2023, just over a year after Elena vanished, Marcus Castellanos was arrested in Reno by FBI agents. He was charged with second-degree murder, insurance fraud, and destruction of evidence. His bail was denied due to flight risk, and he was extradited to Colorado to stand trial. News of the arrest sent shockwaves through Cedar Ridge for months. Neighbors had lived in uneasy silence, half believing Marcus had gotten away with murder. Now, at last, there was hope for justice. Sarah wept when she got the call, clutching her sister's mug as if it were Elena's hand